Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar series of UMEC, Urban Mobility and Equity Center at Morgan State University. Our first presentation is investigating the effect of connected vehicles, route guidance on mobility and equity. This work has been done by myself, Dr. Anna Mardashiri, Dr. Ezaz Sadegh Waziri, and Ali Reza Ansariar, our PhD student. The outline of this presentation is we're going to talk about problem statement and research objectives, literature review, methodology and study area, travel time analysis results, travel time sensitivity analysis, dynamic rerouting analysis, dynamic connected vehicle bus lane evaluation, emission analysis, and at the end, we're going to talk about our findings and conclusion. First of all, why are CVs important? The connected vehicles have the potential to transform travel patterns through wireless communication. They are the ultimate case of IoTs, which is Internet of Things, where multiple vehicles interact with each other and with pedestrian and bicyclists while coordinating with roadside units, RSU, and TMCs. CVs can improve traffic mobility and safety while saving energy and reducing emission. How can CVs improve traffic congestion? They can send and receive real-time alerts about transportation network conditions. They include smart navigation features integrated with location-based services, and they can reroute dynamically when traffic congestion happens. CVs can use route guidance based on V2V, vehicle to vehicle, V2I, vehicle to infrastructure, V2T, which is vehicle to smart terminal technologies. And what is the effect of CVs on equity? While CV technology could significantly improve mobility and safety, disadvantaged population are likely to be overlooked without explicit consideration in the early planning stages of CV projects. CVs could affect not only CV users, but also non-CV users. And we're going to investigate that. So what is the problem statement? Sorry. Yes, what is the problem statement? A few studies utilize microsimulation software to model CV technologies in simplified imaginary network. But nobody has done it in the real network and more complicated networks. Those studies who investigated CVs, they did not fully investigate how the information shared by CVs, like the information like vehicle position, speed, travel time, incidents, how those can affect traffic parameters. Furthermore, the effect of dynamic rerouting of CVs during traffic congestion on transportation equity, such as the effect of CV route guidance on CV owners and non-CV owners, have not been properly investigated in the previous studies. And that's what the stuff that we're going to look in this study. So our objectives are, we're going to develop, and we already did, develop and calibrate a microscopic traffic simulation model in Amazon traffic simulation software to replicate a fairly realistic behavior of CVs in the traffic simulation environment. Driving behavior of CV guidance with various market penetration rate. We looked from 0% all the way to 100%, and various traffic condition is simulated, and the system-wide effect of the CV-equipped vehicles with route guidance features on mobility and equity is analyzed. And we need to mention that the main goal of this study was to explore the system-wide effect of CV route guidance on mobility and equity, and we used Amazon traffic simulator. So now the literature review, my PhD student Ali Reza gonna present.
Hello, everyone. Regarding the literature review section, more than 95 references regarding the connected vehicles, effects on traffic parameters, emission, and equity were reviewed in our research. Various scientific databases were considered. All the relevant studies after 1990 were considered and reviewed in the literature review section. And the objective and methodology, outcome, and gap of each research were determined and reviewed. And finally, based on the previous studies, a new methodology for analyzing the network-wide equity was proposed. Please, next slide. In the next three slides, the outstanding previous studies regarding the effects of gradual deployment of CVs on mobility, emission, and equity are listed. Some of the most important of these researchers are in 1995, Pita and Mahmasani mentioned that there is a close relationship between driver behavior and mobility if the market penetration rate of CVs increase on the transport network. Ketan et al. In 2010 found that if the market penetration rate of CVs increases, network travel time within different traffic groups is mitigated. Winter et al. In 2010 mentioned to the relationship between the gradual deployment of CVs, driver behaviors, and safety. It means that if market penetration rate of CVs increases, drivers' behavior towards complying with driving rules will improve. Consequently, safety on the network will be enhanced. The majority of previous studies concentrate on the dynamic route guidance of CVs. As you can see, Olia et al. In 2013 investigated the route guidance technology of CVs, improves mobility and traffic safety in various conditions such as workspace. Ketan et al. In 2013 found that the route guidance technology of CVs significantly improves the number of incidents. Tian et al. In 2016 found that the route guidance technology of CVs improved the average lane speed. And Liu et al. In 2019 found that the route guidance technology of CVs significantly reduces the number of accidents, increases road safety, and decreases travel time. Please, next slide. Genders et al. In 2016 found that less than 40% of market penetration rate of CVs provided a safer traffic network in special road conditions such as work zone. In another research in 2014, Genders et al. Again found that gradual deployment of CVs can improve travel times by 37%. Reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 30% and improve time to collision by 45%. Tian et al. In 2016 found that from a 0 to 15% market penetration rate, travel time experienced a 37 enhancement. When the market penetration rate increases to 60%, average travel time begin to decrease. Oli et al. In 2016 found that if there is an efficient connection coverage between connected vehicles on the network, it can reduce average travel time by 20%. And Liu et al. In 2019 found that average travel time of connected vehicles significantly decreases from 0% to 50%. Please, next slide. These are other studies about the impression of gradual deployment of connected vehicles on emission, mobility, and safety. For example, Paikari et al. In 2014 found that in 50% market penetration rate, the average travel time on the main corridor of their case study mitigates by 30% to 40% from a baseline condition with no CVs. Lee and Park in 2008 found that in 30% market penetration rate, network-wide average travel time reduces by 29%. And in 70% market penetration rate, network-wide average travel time reduces by 48%. Please, next slide. Finally, after reviewing the mentioned studies, the following limitations were extracted from the previous studies. Market penetration rate and information update intervals were just considered, and gradual deployment of market penetration rate of CVs and information update intervals, for example, in different time intervals for updating the average travel time on the network, such as 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, has received less attention. In our research, sensitivity analysis of network-wide level average travel time was investigated through different time intervals. Some researchers declare that drivers' behavior is not affected by CV technology. Other factors such as type of assignment, such as stochastic or dynamic, level of demand, familiarity rate, and network configuration have not been evaluated. In our research, human factors or driver behavior and reaction to CV technology been investigated in form of CV attributes. We studied gap time per second between CVs, acceleration and deceleration values per meter per square second, reaction time of CVs per second in congestion or any other incident, and the desired maximum speed. And the main achievement of our studies investigating equity at network-wide level. It means that different total volume demand matrices were considered. The network-wide level changes of average travel time with gradual deployment of market penetration rate of CVs from 0% to 100% were analyzed in our research. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alireza. In the next few slides, I'm going to go over the methodology of our study. So as you see in the next slide, we picked a small study area very close to Morgan State University campus in Northeast Baltimore to kind of mimic a kind of real-time, a real-world situation. And we coded that network in AIMSON traffic microsimulator package. We had generated vehicular traffic and transit traffic in the network. Our network, which you're going to see in the next slide, had 9 nodes, and we were able to generate demand from all nodes into the network. To evaluate mobility and equity, we focused on travel time as the main measure of effectiveness in this analysis, which I'm gonna share the outputs with you. And to be able to achieve our objectives, we ran thousands of simulation scenarios, and we analyzed, which you see some of the reports here. I'm gonna talk about our dynamic rerouting feature to kind of mimic the CV cars in our network, and the traffic assignment methodology that we use for our CV cars and non-CV cars, which happen to be a hybrid approach of stochastic and dynamic assignment. So this slide shows our network, which consists of 3 north-south corridors and 2 east-west corridors, total 6 intersections, all unsignalized. And also, we didn't collect real world data like traffic counts or signal or control, traffic control information or traffic volumes. We tried to kind of mimic a real world condition to see what happens to the network when we have an incident in our major corridor here, which is the middle north-south corridor, the Alameda. And we tried to simulate one of the peak hour conditions, which is AM peak and southbound directions carry heavier traffic in AM peak. So the incident that we simulated in our network to kind of evaluate the non-recurrent traffic condition was for 15 minutes duration, which closed both lanes of southbound Alameda, the middle corridor in this picture, and for 15 minutes. And after that, both lanes were open to traffic. You see a couple of bus stops, and we have bus traffic only on Alameda Street. So a little bit more characteristics about our network and roadways. As you see here, Alameda is the major one with 45 miles per hour speed limit and 1,800 passenger car per hour per lane capacity. These are the inputs that we needed to put in AIMSON to code and calibrate our network. East-west corridors are minor or side streets, so they had two-way stop control when they hit a major corridor. So Alameda, Loch Raven, and Tivoli, or north-south corridors, they had right-of-way, and they had free movement when they approached these unsignalized intersections. The speed limits and capacity for the minor roads are shown here. And we try to have a mix of roadways so we can better show the diversion behavior when the incident happens in Alameda. So the diversion pattern is not uniform across the two parallel alternatives. As you saw in the past slide and in this slide on the left side, so we defined 10 nodes for a network to be able to generate traffic volume. So with 10 nodes, we can potentially have a 10 by 10 or 100 cells value in a trip table matrix. But we only decided to fill in 15 cells out of these trip table, this big trip table, to kind of simplify the network and our analysis to avoid any crash or a slowdown of our simulation model when we wanted to run thousands of scenarios. And we realized actually that incident and CV penetration rate is not going to impact that much the northbound traffic flow, the opposite direction of incident and the opposite direction of peak hours. So we didn't want to add traffic a lot to those northbound corridors. So we focus on our major corridor and the major direction, which is the southbound. And overall, we had 2,400 traffic volume per hour in our peak hour analysis. To achieve our objectives, we defined 15 scenarios to kind of gradually show the increase of CV penetration rate on travel time, on transportation mobility and equity. We started with the base scenario, which I'm showing you scenario number 1 here, when there was no incident and the network was in stable condition. And all of our vehicles were non-CV cars or conventional vehicles. They were conventional vehicles. And then in the next scenario, so we wanted to have a benchmark and base travel time to evaluate the change. In scenario number 2, we added incident, and as I said, for 15 minutes period in one corridor, southbound direction, the heaviest traffic volume. And after 15 minutes, it was cleared, so both lanes were open. Still in that scenario, we had 100% of our vehicles as conventional, so they would use a static traffic assignment to get to their destination from the origin. And from scenario number 3 all the way to 15, we gradually added 10% CV cars in the network, basically replaced 10% of those non-CV cars with CV cars. So the total volume didn't change. We kept the total volume the same, and we only performed 10% gradual deployment in the CV market. From, as I said, 0% to 100% in scenario number 14. And then you see 3 blue lines here. In these scenarios, we wanted to evaluate CV bus scenarios. So what happens if our bus system or transit system is equipped with 100% CV buses, and they can use some features that I'm going to talk later in this presentation. Let's go over a little bit on our methodology. So as I said, we had both CV cars and non-CV cars in our network. Non-CV cars, the conventional vehicles, they always go by the static assignment and the shortest path algorithm. They're not going to get real-time information to update their route. However, our CV vehicles, as what we expect in the future, are going to receive real-time information about travel time, about link travel time. So if an incident happens, they can reroute and find another path that is going to get them to the destination quicker and reroute. To communicate with our connected vehicles, we use the assumption that in 30 seconds, or every 30 seconds, our link travel time is going to get updated, and connected vehicle cars are going to receive that updated travel time information every 30 seconds to reroute if needed. We perform some sensitivity analysis over this parameter, which let's call it information dissemination rate, which I'm going to show you the results later. But 30 seconds was the base value we used. So our connected cars are going to be updated with the travel time down the road every 30 seconds. So for each scenario, we perform 10 runs and use the average because this is micro simulation and stochastic behavior. And our main focus was on OD type travel time. And then we merged and integrated those ODs into a network-wide level analysis. So as Dr. Gianni mentioned, we know that our CV cars, or when we deploy more CV in the network, they're not going to only, try to shorten their travel time, but there is going to be impact, usually benefit to other vehicle types and non-CV users, let's say. For instance, non-CV cars or transit riders. And in this study, we are going to evaluate that impact into traffic, into our vehicle types, CV cars, non-CV cars, and buses by mode and by scenario. Let's begin with our main route, which the incident happens. And in this route, which is Alameda, both southbound and northbound, we have a transit line. So you see 3 curves here. And for the next few slides, we're using blue line for CV car, red line for non-CV cars, and green for transit or buses. So southbound Alameda, in the base scenario, you see that the travel time is almost 100 seconds in a free flow type condition or acceptable level of service. When incident happens, it jumps to almost something between 200 to 250 seconds. And then as soon as we introduce connected vehicle technology and add or basically replace the cars, the conventional cars with connected cars, we see that not only travel time improves for connected vehicles, but also for non-connected vehicles. For non-CV cars and buses, they gradually decrease as CV penetration rate goes up. However, the difference between CV car and non-CV car travel time is really significant. So they were getting much more benefit. Let's look at the opposite direction, the opposite of incident, northbound Alameda. As you see, it's not getting that much impact from neither from traffic or incident or from the CV penetration rate. The two CV car and non-CV car charts, the blue and red, are almost overlap. So that's expected. They're not a lot of traffic and they're not being impacted by incident. So they won't be impacted by adding more CV to the network. The main alternative here to Alameda is like Raven. It had 35 miles per hour speed limit and the second largest capacity. We would expect that some of diversion, if incident happens, come to the this corridor. But let's first look at the corridor by itself, coming from the top of Loch Raven to the bottom. And as you see here, it seems the roadway is large enough and has enough capacity to handle extra traffic that are being rerouted from Alameda. And it's not showing any impact, neither by incident nor by increasing CV penetration rate. And as I said, there is no transit line here, so we only see CV cars and non-CV cars for this corridor and the next corridors that I'm going to show. Northbound Loch Raven. So as expected, there's no incident, and this is the off-peak direction. So we expected to see no changes between CV car and non-CV cars. The second alternative that we expect traffic reroute to it is Tivoli on the right side. And again, no major impact here. So I just want to share this as expected. Northbound and southbound direction. They kind of overlap CV car and non-CV car graphs. Now let's shift the gear to east-west corridors. Windermere is the top corridor, two-way corridor. So we're looking at the eastbound direction now. So as you see, when the incident happens, the red line, there's a jump in travel time. And it is probably due to the fact that those intersections are kind of being blocked by the major routes like Alameda. The traffic normally backs up to that intersection. So it slows down the movement, and the minor corridor traffic has a hard time to find a gap to cross because they have to stop. Let's look at the opposite direction, westbound. Here, the change is even more significant. And the surprising thing is we see increase in travel time, not only for non-CV cars, but also for CV cars, which is something we don't like. But the fact is, for these smaller streets, because they're much more sensitive to traffic conditions, they get really impacted when the traffic is being rerouted or diverted from Alameda to other parallel streets like Raven and Tivoli. So they bring congestion to this small side street, and the traffic on this street who wants to go straight is being suffered by that extra traffic. The bottom east-west corridor, which is Lakeside, eastbound direction, pretty much similar pattern as we saw for Windermere. Now let's look at the westbound direction. And again, you see really anomaly when the CV rate goes really up. So it shows that not necessarily adding CV penetration rate is going to help. We saw it benefited the main corridor, Alameda, where the incident was, and that was a major corridor with higher volume. But for this minor street, it is not helping, definitely. So we wanted to show every single corridor and then draw our conclusion when we merge the corridors and combine them in a network-wide level. But before doing so, let's look at some, I would say, non-straight or more complex OD pairs, origin destination pairs. Here, my origin is top of Loch Raven, the destination is at the bottom of Alameda. So they need to make a turn, even in their free flow condition. Here you see that there is a decreasing pattern and travel time is getting improved as our CV penetration rate goes up. Another complex route, I call it, from northwest of the network to the southeast. And you see the change is much more significant for the non-CV cars. But overall, both CV and non-CV travel times are being improved. But the change is not linear. So you see some peaks, especially at around 80% or 85%, which seems that to make the most benefit for both CV and non-CV cars. And after that, it looks flat. Another route from Alameda to Loch Raven. We expect severe change here because this is the incident route, and we assume that an incident happens, a lot of CV cars are gonna probably turn right at the first intersection and then turn left at Loch Raven and go straight to their destination. So you see there are two steps here, one at around 45% and then at around 80% that CV cars and non-CV cars benefit a lot and improve their travel time. From Alameda to Tivoli on the southeast corner of the network, again, we see overall improvement for both CV and non-CV cars. Another route from northeast to southwest corner. These routes, they don't have a lot of traffic, but we wanted to show them as they would impact the average network-wide analysis and to better understand the diversion behavior here. Again, we see improvement on both corridors. So CV deployment is helping. But again, after 85%, it looks flat. We don't see major change to travel time. So the majority of change is happening between 40% to 80%. So then what we did, we combined all of these 15 OD pairs into one network-wide travel time for each mode. So you're seeing three different lines for three modes. Again, blue line is the CV car, which has the lowest travel time compared to non-CV and buses. And you see it has a global minimum point of 85%, which means that that's the optimum CV penetration rate for CV cars. And after that, it's not gonna, not only it's not gonna help CV cars, but it's gonna hurt the travel time for CV cars. However, that's not the case for non-CV cars and buses. Non-CV cars, the red line shows steady decrease in travel time, even after 85%. So they're getting benefit. So non-CV users are getting benefit by this deployment, so as the buses, the green line. And let me confirm that all of the buses in this analysis we are showing are non-CV buses. We have separate charts for CV buses, which I'm going to get to it. So we combined CV cars and non-CV together. And in this graph, you're seeing the average travel time, weighted travel time, average weighted, because our number of CV and non-CV cars were different in each scenario as we were replacing non-CV cars with CV cars. And again, you see that minimum happens at around 85% penetration rate. Which is an important finding in our study. And when we added transit to it and did a multimodal analysis, we found the same pattern. So in this chart, we made some rough assumptions for ridership for our transit system. As I said, we had 3 transit lines altogether. I would say 13 buses per hour each direction. And we made some assumptions and we performed some sensitivity analysis, but I'm showing just a base model here, which is consistent with the Car analysis in the past few slides, the optimum point of around 85% network-wide. So now let's do some sensitivity analysis to be able to generalize our findings. And mainly the sensitivity analysis was over traffic volume and the traffic information dissemination rate. So let's, the focus here is just the main route where we have the incident, which is southbound Alameda, OD 1886 to 1880. So let's review the base chart together again. So we are showing 3 different vehicle types: non-CV cars, CV cars, and non-CV buses. And we played with the volume, traffic volume of the network, not only for this corridor, but the entire OD. We added 20% and reduced the volume by 20% to see how these relationship between these 3 charts change, or if there's any change in the pattern, in the minimum. So let's look at the non-CV cars. So we're showing by mode. Non-CV cars, the orange line is the base traffic condition, and the gray and blue lines show the change in travel time when we add or reduce 20% of traffic, which is pretty consistent. Also, the gray line shows more significant changes, and it seems it's shifting the optimum point a little bit. CV cars, the same. Again, adding traffic, it seems it's more significant, and it is limiting the benefit that you're getting from CV penetration rate or CV deployment. Non-CV buses, again, adding or reducing traffic is expected. We are seeing expected results in travel time. And also for the higher traffic, it's overlapping the base traffic when our penetration rate is over 85%. All of the analysis I showed so far, the results was about travel time. We performed post-processing because AIMSON doesn't report that by OD and network-wide. What it reports is delay analysis. And this is a typical network delay analysis that it generates. So I just want to show that this is also consistent with travel time. And basically it's showing travel time or delay decreases when CV penetration rate goes up. And the 3 lines are kind of parallel when traffic volume changes in the network. So far, all the analysis assumed we have 100% non-CV cars. But let's say that we do bus CV deployment sooner than car, and let's say 100% of our bus fleet is equipped with CV technology. So basically 100% CV bus, 0% non-CV bus. And as I said, we had 26 buses overall in the network, 30 by direction in Alameda. And we had analyzed 3 points or 3 different CV car penetration rates, 0%, 50%, and 100%, to see how the travel time changes for each mode if we have a full CV bus system. As expected, travel time gets improved when we add more CV cars. But let's focus on CV buses only and evaluate that by the change in traffic volume. That's pretty consistent with what we saw when we had non-CV buses. Also, the overall travel time is slightly better, but the relative travel time is showing the same pattern as we improve CV car penetration rate. One other important finding I was going to share here is the change to the optimum CV penetration rate when the traffic volume changes. So we did this analysis to see what happens if the network or kind of show different time of day traffic level, like peak hour, non-peak hour. So as you see in this network, when total traffic volume goes up, the optimum point of CV penetration rate, which means the point that our network-wide travel time is minimum, that point is decreasing. Remember, we had 85%, and as you see here, when we did analysis, it goes down even to 50% when we add more traffic and we get closer to network saturation rate, which kind of makes sense. This is the same concept we see in our adaptive signal system. As you know, when our network is oversaturated, deploying adaptive signal system or fully actuated, it's not going to help that much because you don't have enough room to play with it. And here, this is the same concept. When a network gets congested, all network, all roadways, there are not a whole lot options for CV cars to reroute and improve their travel time. So they're going to pretty much behave the same way that non-CV cars are behaving, statically assigning to the destination, or static assignment. And the last type of sensitivity analysis we performed was over the rate of information dissemination. How quickly CV cars can receive updated travel time to make better decisions, to get to their destination faster. So this kind of mimics, the CV, how quickly CV cars receive the updated travel time to avoid the congested route and possibly reroute. This graph shows 3 different scenarios: 30 seconds interval, which was the base interval we used for information dissemination, 2 minutes, and 5 minutes. How CV cars travel time can change. As you see, it significantly increases travel time if they get notified in a slower pace. So the 5-minute interval, the black line, is on top of those two, which means that the benefit of CV penetration overall decreases when our travel time dissemination rate increases. Even worse for non-CV cars. So non-CV cars suffer even more from that information dissemination rate if it gets slower. If CV cars get notified not quickly to be able to reroute, so they're gonna stick to the congested route and make that worse for themselves and for non-CV cars. Let me talk a little bit about our dynamic rerouting analysis and the methodology. The methodology is pretty much the same as I talked earlier. So as I said, for non-CV users, they were statically assigned to the network. However, our CV cars were dynamically assigned. So by dynamically assignment, I mean that travel time and link travel time and link cost function was being updated every 30 seconds. So they could reroute and improve their travel time. So let's focus on our major route, southbound Alameda again, and see what happens, the details of rerouting, or basically what happens behind the scene that we are seeing improvement in travel time. not only for Alameda, but CV users, but for its non-CV users. So as you see in the left picture, so focus is southbound Alameda when we have the incident in the second scenario. And we are gradually adding CV cars or deploying 10% interval CV cars to the network. So the base demand for this OD southbound Alameda from origin to destination was 550 cars per hour, which in the first scenario, all of those 550 cars were non-CV. And gradually, we changed the configuration and the distribution. So this blue line, let me explain this. When we say 10% scenario, it means that out of those 550, 55 of them, which is 10%, are CV cars, and the remaining, which is 495, are non-CV users. And then when we looked at the output of the simulation and basically the average of 10 runs for each scenario, this was the diversion pattern. So out of those 55, out of those 55 CV cars, 45 stayed on their route, which is basically the typical shortest path when incident didn't happen. And this is the same route that all non-CV cars are going to take. However, 10 of them, they basically reroute and decided to use either Lock Raven or Tivoli. Distribution here is 7-3 because Lock Raven has more capacity. And the same concept for other scenarios. In 20%, we had more CV cars, 110, and out of those 110, 22 of them actually diverted to either Lock Raven or Tivoli. So as you see, this growth is not linear because of the stochastic feature of the network and travel time, how it changes. And we are using roadways with different characteristics and the control type of the intersections. So they're not going up by the same pace as you see here for both of our alternatives. We have shown them in graphics, so I'm just going to quickly go over these 10 scenarios. So this is the base scenario we went over together. Out of those 55 out of those 55 CV cars, 45 stayed there, and then 10 diverted, 7 here. You're showing by green, and then 3 CV cars used the blue line and Tivoli and made another right here and came back to the destination. So the point here is using user equilibrium concept, the travel time on all of the routes should be similar. Basically, the principle is no single user can change his or her route to make it faster. So as you see, travel times are kind of equal in all 3 alternatives. And it's the same concept for all scenarios. It's going down travel time because of the more CV cars or more cars that can reroute and find a better path. So travel time is decreasing. However, it's the same for all alternatives. Like here, 164 seconds almost. 40%, 50%, and 60% scenarios, CV rates. We're showing the same numbers we showed in table. 70%. And to find that optimal point, we added more scenarios, like 75% scenario, 85% scenario, to better find out that breaking point, which sometimes was between 75, 80, and 85, depending on the traffic volume. But the overall conclusion was the travel time decreased when CV penetration rate went up. We investigated a couple of transit scenarios. Basically, we explored how we can improve transit riders with CV technology in this environment. Since we didn't have a traffic light, we couldn't analyze transit signal priority strategies. So we focused on dynamic bus lane, which is a very common and popular strategy these days across American cities, which they're repurposing one general purpose lane and using it for buses only. We call it either dynamic bus lane or dedicated bus lane. But dynamic bus lane is when you use that lane for transit only certain times of the day or hours of the day, like peak hours or incident hours. So here for our network, if you remember, we had two lanes, southbound Alameda, and when the incident happened, both lanes were blocked. So we decided for the duration in incident to repurpose that right lane for transit. So bring basically transit vehicles ahead of traffic so they can bypass the congestion when everything is clear. We developed two scenarios. We ran two scenarios to evaluate the impact of dynamic bus lane. And the first scenario, as soon as incident happened, we repurposed the right lane for transit for 15 minutes, the exact duration of incident. And then after 15 minutes, the lane was back to its main purpose for general traffic. So all other CV cars and non-CV cars could use the right lane. And in our second scenario, we extended bus lane for another 15 minutes, basically the total 30 minutes, 15 minutes after incident is over, to kind of clear buses faster than cars. And we evaluated bus travel time in both scenarios, where you see the results here. The blue line is the base condition when we didn't have a dynamic bus lane. So buses would stuck in traffic like other cars in the middle of the road. But then the red line shows the 15-minute dynamic bus lane, and black line shows 30-minute dynamic bus lane. And you see significant improvement, I would say at least 15% reduction in travel time as a result of adding dynamic bus lane, which is a significant improvement. So again, this was dynamic improvement, and as soon as the network was back to normal condition, the bus lane was over. So it requires ITS equipment to notify drivers and bus drivers of this lane change, lane purpose change. Now let's evaluate the effect of dynamic bus lane on other mode of traffic, like non-CV cars. So as you see, non-CV cars travel time is getting worse when we apply dynamic bus lane. So blue line is the baseline, is a base condition, and when we add 15-minute dynamic bus lane, travel time for CV for non-CV cars go up, and then another increase when we extend dynamic bus lane. And as expected, this is the same case for CV cars. So this strategy is mainly helping transit users. And finally, let's see all three modes together. What happens when we have this 15-minute strategy? As you see here now, CV bus takes the first rank, and this ranks as the shortest travel time among other modes, even faster than CV cars. It can get its passenger to a destination. And when we extend that another 15 minutes, you see that the distance gets bigger between CV car and CV bus. And with that said, I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Sadegh Waziri for emission analysis.
Thank you, Dr. Ardeshiri. In the next few slides, I'm gonna go through emission analysis models in AIMSON and our conclusion. So basically, AIMSON has three main emission analysis models. The first one is Quartet, second one is PANIS, and third one is London Emission Model, LEM. So let me go through each one of them very briefly and say which one of them that we chose eventually. Quartet is one of the most accurate emission models, and it can predict the emissions very accurately. However, it needs all the information at the very first step. It requires several input parameters, and you need to define all of these things. It provides the emission based on the idling emission rates, acceleration, deceleration rates, and speed dependence rate. It has its own benefit and it has its own downside. Another one is PANIS one. PANIS is one of the most accurate one. It's based on the traffic speed limits, and the good thing about this model is that it's already the exact value of input parameters has already been determined and identified by PANIS. And eventually the last one is LEM. The London model can provide the carbon dioxide and NOx's emissions very well. However, it was based on the London and it was developed in 2017. If you want to have it here, you need to calibrate it for sure. And also it's based on some linear regression models, and it's not as accurate as the previous two ones. So after a thorough investigation among them for our network, we chose the PANIS one because it's one of the most accurate one, and also we had the default values of the inputs for the emissions that we are looking for. Basically, in this analysis, we wanted to go for 4 major emissions: PM, particle matters, carbon dioxide, and NOxes and VOC. We went through all of these things one by one. If we can go for the next slide, and then we saw that in each one of all those, if you want to read more about all the variables in the PANIS model, you can refer to their paper that was published in 2016. So in terms of the trend that we saw for carbon dioxide, we saw that once we are increasing the percentage of CVs, we are increasing the market penetration rate for CVs, basically going from the scenario 1 to 15, we understood that the emissions decreased for carbon dioxide. This is fantastic finding, and it gives us the very good insight that this is the future of the road networks, and the more CV, the less emission. We went for the other emission gases such as NOxes, and we saw the same pattern, and the same thing for particle matters and also VOC. If we can go for the next slide, please. And yeah, you can see that the same thing we are observing here. The more number of CVs resulting to less PM, and the resulting also to less VOC. So the conclusion here is that the more number of CV that we are going to have less emission. All right, so now let's go to the conclusion of the whole study. We came up with 5 major findings. Let's first talk about what we have learned from the total delay. We understood that the total delay time can be improved when there are connected vehicles in the road network compared when there are not. When we have the base volume, the improved travel delay time improved by 20.6%. When we have plus 20 traffic, the total delay time improved by 14.9%. And once we have low traffic, minus 20% of the base model, we have 21.2% improvement in the total delay time. In terms of the emission, we understood that once we are using the low traffic volume, I mean that minus 20% of the the traffic volume. In terms of all those features, those 4 major emissions that we were looking and investigating to them, carbon dioxide improved by 5.4% and NOx improved by 7.6%, and PM improved by 26.7%, and VOC improved by 6.4%. The same pattern, we saw it once we used it with base model, and once even we increased the traffic volume to 20%. And this shows that the traffic volume, the more CV that we have, the more market penetration rate of the CV that we have, result to less gas emissions. And also in terms of the dynamic rerouting that we investigated, we understood that once the number of rerouting CV car increases, the average travel time in rerouting path decreases. And we noticed that averagely 25% of connected cars rerouted from scenario 4 to 14. And in terms of the dynamic CV bus lanes, as you noticed that Dr. Ardeshiri mentioned, that we used 15 minutes dynamic CV bus, and once we used that, the travel time improved by 11.9% for CV buses. And then in the next step, we went one step further, and we wanted to see that if we increase the dynamic CV bus lane to 30 minutes, what will happen? And then we noticed that the CV bus lane can decrease, and the average travel time by 16.4%. And it means that the more CV bus lane that we can allocate in terms of the time, the better result we can obtain. And eventually, in terms of the equity point of view, we understood that weighted network wide average travel time chart experience and descending trend from 0% market penetration rate to 85%. It means that 80% market penetration rate was identified as critical breakpoint for our chart. The greater amount of that, the more number of CV compared to 85%, the chart was stabilized, and it's slightly just increased. So we can come to this conclusion that we identified 85% as the breakpoint for our study. And also, once we increase the volume demand, the percentage of critical breakpoint increases, then shifts to right. And now I will hand it over to Professor Jehani.
Thank you. Our work had some limitations, and we can work on it and improve it for the future work and study. First of all, although we did a fairly realistic network, and we used a real network, but the network was was small, and we could increase the size of the network to be an intermediate network size. We did not look at the volume and distribution and composition of the traffic in the real world of that network. We use hypothetical traffic parameters. However, we looked at the low, medium, and high traffic volume. And also, we did not have any traffic signals, partly because the network that we picked did not have a traffic signal. But if we have a larger network and a more complicated one and include traffic signal, we can look at strategies for transit strategies such as TSB and QJ. We can test those as well. And also when we had our two lanes, they were both closed at the incident time. For the clearing incident, we could have one lane at a time to clear, and so have two stages of one lane open and then the next lane open, and see the gradual effect of that on traffic and on the clearance. We also did not look at, we did not use the V2X of the CV V2X module for AIMSON. We made it ourselves and we coded ourselves, but if we use that, I mean, in the next step, we could use that, and we could use roadside units and look at the penetration of the roadside unit as well, because we just look at the penetration of the CVs, not the roadside units. So our study can be expanded to all these items that we talked about. Thank you very much for listening to our webinar, and we'll see you next in our next webinar series and also our next presentations. Thank you.